Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Let me turn that off. Awesome. Thank you. Cool. So in last week's recording, I noticed that the audio was cutting out when I was writing. So if we could do a little experiment here, I'm just going to start scribbling in the margins here, and if someone could confirm whether it's interfering with my audio during the live stream, that would be very helpful. Were we getting any interruptions in audio? Fantastic. Okay. Then, without further ado, we're going to dive into the immune system. This is kind of a big topic, just because there's a lot of moving parts and, frankly, a lot of things to be memorized. And so, key to your success in understanding this unit will be knowing what all of the different types of cells are and what their jobs are. So, this first chart here, if you are a person who flashcards, these are very flashcardable. And you can also pull from, let me find the chapter specifically, chapter 43 in the Campbell Biology textbook. I'm going to go ahead and write that here. Chapter 43 has a lot of really helpful graphics if you are someone who does digital flashcards. Doing some screen grabs of those and then doing image occlusion will be very helpful for these. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Hearing none, or reading none, let's dive into it. Bacterium or virus particles. We simply have terms on the left, definitions on the right. Write these in your own words to facilitate your own learning, but to start things off, bacterium or virus particles. These are simply types of pathogens, things that might activate an immune response. Next, we have helper T cells, helper T cell, receptor, helper T cell. This is a type of immune cell that stimulates killer T cells, macrophages, and B cells, these are other immune cells, to make an immune response. So, type of immune cell that stimulates killer T cells, macrophages, B cells. In short, makes an immune response. Next up, we have cytotoxic T cells. So a T lymphocyte, lymph generally means immune cell. A T lymphocyte is a type of white blood cell that kills cancer cells, cells that are infected by intracellular pathogens, inside the cell. Pathogens such as viruses or bacteria, or cells that are damaged in other ways. So, a cytotoxic T cell is a T cell, a T lymphocyte. Let's go ahead and make sure we. T lymphocyte that kills cancer. cells infected by intracellular pathogens or otherwise damaged cells. As always, if you have questions as we're going, drop it in the chat and I will address it as soon as I can. Let's see. B cells. B cells are another type of lymphocyte that are responsible for the humoral immunity component of the adaptive immune system. So these white blood cells produce antibodies, which play key parts in immunity. So let's see. Question, killer T cells are not cytotoxic T cells. Are cytotoxic? We're going to Google this one because I don't want to lead you astray. A killer T cell is a type of white blood cell and a type of lymphocyte, also called cytotoxic T cells. They are one and the same. It's a good catch. All right. B cells are a type of lymphocyte responsible for humoral immunity component of the adaptive immune system. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this because adaptive immunity versus innate immunity will more than likely be an exam question. Next we have memory helper T cells. Memory T cells are antigen experienced cells, meaning they have experienced an antigen associated with a pathogen, that mediate a faster and more potent response upon repeat encounter with an antigen. So, antigen experienced cells that mediate a faster and more potent immune response to a pathogen. I'm going to change my format here a little bit. Change the size of my marker here so that we can actually get inside these boxes, because it may not be bothering you, but it's bothering me visually. Fantastic. Okay. Next up, memory B cells. This is a type of B lymphocyte that forms part of the adaptive immune system. Adaptive immune system. These cells develop within germinal centers of the secondary lymphoid organs. Memory B cells are circulate in the bloodstream in what's called a quiescent state, sometimes for decades. So these are the cells that hang around in your system long after the infection has passed, and will basically be activated if it recognizes the same pathogen again, to tee up that more targeted immune response. So for those vaccines that you get like once when you're a baby, this is them. Germinal centers, yeah. So germ cells. Um, Germinal centers develop in the B cell follicles of secondary lymphoid tissues. Let's see. It's a specialized microstructure that forms in secondary lymphoid tissue, and it is specific for memory B cell production. So important here, B cells circulate memory B cells. Circulating the bloodstream long term. Cytokines or cytokines, depending on which region you were educated in. These are any number of substances such as interferon, interleukin, and growth factors. And they're all secreted by certain cells of the immune system and have an effect on other cells. So it's part of the immune response, and it's really diverse. And at this level, we're not going to get super deep into it. Any number of substances such as interferon, interleukins, and growth factors. Interleukins. Interleukins or IL are a type of cytokine first thought to be expressed by leukocytes alone, but have later been found to be produced by many other body parts. So, type of cytokine. Cool. Uh-oh. All right. If I stop writing, does the signal improve? Okay. Okay. What we're experiencing is probably my tablet overheating. So I'm going to crack open a window. Hopefully it's not too disruptive sound-wise. And I'm going to revert to typing and see if this works. Okay. Yeah, I imagine it's a lot of processing power for the tablet to be managing streaming and interpreting my handwriting. So we'll try this out. If it doesn't work, we'll start disabling other components and try and get some bandwidth back here. So next up we got CD4 protein. These are cluster of differentiation. CD4. This is a glycoprotein that serves as a co-receptor for the T cell receptors, TCRs, which we'll get to in a moment. CD4 is found on the surface of immune cells such as T helper cells, monocytes, macrophages, and dendritic cells. Glycoprotein, so in that extracellular matrix, that serves as a co-receptor for T cell receptors. Found on surface of monocytes, T helper cells, macrophages, and dendritic cells. Is the typing going to work okay for people? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Thanks for problem solving this with me, folks. Cool. MHC 1 and 2 molecules. So MHC is major histocompatibility complex. I'm actually going to type that over here. Major histocompatibility complex. Wow. All right. Formatting. Here we go. Awesome. What are these for? Class 1 MHC molecules span the membrane of almost every cell in an organism. And while class 2 cells are restricted to cells of the immune system called macrophages and lymphocytes specifically. So class 1, major histocompatibility complex molecules, span the membranes of most cells. Class 2 MHCs restricted to immune system cells, macrophages, and lymphocytes only. Cool. Antibodies. These are important. Antibodies are a blood protein produced in response to and counteracting a specific antigen. So antibodies, antigen. Antibodies combine chemically with substances which the body recognizes as alien or foreign, such as bacteria, viruses, any other foreign substance in the blood. So, the blood protein produced in response to and counteracting a specific antigen. Yeah, we're not going to try to highlight that right now. Combine chemically with substances recognized as foreign by the body. Yeah. Antibody, antigen. An antigen is a toxin or other foreign substance which induces an immune response, quite simply. We'll get a little higher resolution here, but toxin or foreign substance inducing an immune response, especially the production of antibodies. All right, epitope. So this is one where, in all of these, having a little bit of a background in something like Romance languages or Latin can help you sort of intuit what the meaning of a word might be. Epi is above, typically. That prefix means above or on top of. So an epitope is the part of an antigen molecule to which an antibody attaches itself. So it's the most prominent part of the antigen molecule. Part of an antigen molecule to which an antibody attaches itself. All right, the thymus. The thymus is a specialized primary lymphoid organ, lymphoid of the immune system. Within the thymus, thymus cell lymphocytes, or T cells, that's where the T comes from. T cells, thymus cells, mature in the thymus. So specialized primary lymphoid immune system organ. Site of T cell maturation. Yeah, and just to drive this home again, T cells are critical to the adaptive immune system. I don't think that was above, but we're going to put it here. I'm just going to put it in all caps. Where the body adapts to a specific invader, specifically to foreign invaders, sorry. Cool. Bone marrow is kind of cool. We typically think of our bones as being really solid structures, but their centers are really pretty gooey and spongy. Bone marrow is the spongy tissue inside of some of your bones, most of your bones, such as your hip and thigh bones. These contain stem cells, and the stem cells can develop into the red blood cells that carry oxygen throughout your body, or into the white blood cells that fight infection, and platelets that help with blood clotting. So bone marrow, spongy tissue in center of some bones. Hips, thigh bone. Containing stem cells. Can form red and white blood cells, as well as platelets. Make sure I'm... Yeah. Question, so when a person has issues with their thymus, that means the T cells are grown abnormally. A problem with the thymus would probably manifest in deficient T cells. Yeah, I think that's a fair inference. So a disease of the thymus would be a disease of the immune system. Ooh, so there's also a comment here about the root for epi making epinephrine make so much more sense. So epinephrine is related to the hormone adrenaline, and the site of adrenaline production in your body is on the superior part of your kidney, specifically the nephron of the kidney. And so epinephrine, top of the nephron, top of the kidney, is the endocrine gland responsible for adrenaline production. Yep, the adrenal gland. So the hormone epinephrine, which induces, which is the treatment for anaphylaxis, for intense allergic reactions, and also a stress response. The name is related to exactly where to find it. So we got a couple other questions in here. Go. Yeah, it's one of those things too where like until someone takes the time to explain it to you, you would never know that unless you speak Latin, which most of us do not. Do the cells grown in bone marrow then just diffuse out of the bone? bones are fairly vascular as well. So, there are lots of reasons why breaking a bone is the worst. But, one of that is there is a lot of vascular tissue in there. You can lose a lot of blood just through having broken a bone. So, yes, there's diffusion happening across vascular brains, but also I don't actually know if blood diffuses straight out of the bone matrix. I don't remember. I do know that in my health sciences physics class in the fall term, we discussed that at some length, and I'm just having a brain fart and can't remember. So just to review, because we got a little sidetracked there. So bone marrow is responsible for the production of red and white blood cells, as well as platelets. Red blood cells transport oxygen, like we were talking about in the circulation and respiration units the last 2 weeks. White blood cells, which is the focus of our discussion today, as well as platelets for clotting, which we will talk about as well. Response to traumatic injury does also trigger an immune system response. Speaking of immune system responses, we have... Yes, so we're on the hypothalamus now. This actually ties in nicely with our little sidebar about epinephrine. So the hypothalamus is a region of the forebrain below the thalamus, so hypo, below the thalamus. Which coordinates both the autonomic nervous system and the activity of the pituitary. So autonomic is outside of our control. It's unconscious control. Controlling body temperature, thirst, hunger, other homeostatic systems involved in sleep and emotional activity. So the hypothalamus, region of the forebrain below the thalamus, coordinating both autonomic nervous system and activity of the pituitary. We'll get really in depth in the pituitary when we get into the endocrine unit, and I can't remember if that's winter or spring term, but I'm excited for that one. Controls body temp, or helps control. So in my answer key here, I'm a little fuzzy on the wording here. If they're saying that the hypothalamus is responsible for control of temperature, thirst, hunger, etc., or if the hypothalamus, in coordination with the pituitary, controls body temperature. I think it's both. I think it's facilitated by both. So controls body temp, thirst, hunger, homeostatic systems, other homeostatic systems, and sleep and emotional activity. Cool. Any questions so far? We're about a half hour in. Moving right along. So, in talking about immune responses, fever is the one that everybody notices. I remember from A&P, it's both hypothalamus and pituitary. So they're working in coordination with each other. The pituitary is directly responsible for a lot of hormone regulation. I can scroll up. So again, the hypothalamus, hypo, below, thalamus, is the region of the forebrain, unique to higher order mammals. Coordinating both autonomic nervous system and activity of the pituitary, controls body temp, thirst, hunger, other homeostatic systems. I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Sleep and emotional activity. No problem. All right. So moving on to fever, this is one of the first immune responses that people might notice when they are sick, and it is a healthy, normal response to an invader. Right? Fever is a temporary increase in your body temperature, often due to an illness. Having a fever is a sign that something is out of the ordinary is going on in your body. So a temporary increase in body temp. Often due to illness. Early sign that something abnormal is going on in the body. So if you ever end up in a like a clinical setting working with patients, if someone's coming in with like scratchy throat, injury, whatever, you're taking a temperature because it's going to give you a sense of where they're at in their immune response and whether they might have some underlying infection that their body is fighting. All right, clonal expansion. So we're kind of looping back up now to the various immune cells. Clonal expansion is antigen-derived, well, hang on. It's the proliferation and differentiation of cells with specific antigen receptors. All right. Clonal expansion is when the antigen derives the proliferation and differentiation of cells with specific antigen receptors. We were talking about those memory B cells. Memory B cells and memory T cells staying in the system for a long time. The clonal expansion and clonal selection is the mechanism by which those memory cells are activated and turn into additional cells to fight that specific antigen. So, all right. Self versus non-self. So the key difference between these is that antigens on the own body cells are known as self-antigens, while the antigens that do not originate in the own body are called non-self antigens. So an antigen is any substance, again, that induces the immune system to produce antibodies. You can get immune cells, I think it's called vertical immunity. So, for example, the immunity that a mother passes to child would be non-self. Is the point of raising the body temperature to kill pathogens? So, simple question with a very complicated answer. In a word, yeah, we think so. That's part of it. I don't know is the longer answer. This is one of those things where I'm going to refrain from using anecdotal evidence here. So it's actually a big question, and we've all been told that at some point in our education. It's more complicated than that. So I'm going to deflect for now. Self versus non-self. Yeah. Yep. Self, antigens originating within the body. Non-self, antigens originating outside the body. Would fever be considered an inflammatory response? Again, this is why it's complicated. You could theoretically have one without the other, right? All right, so what are pathogens? Why do we need to prevent them from colonizing our bodies? And if pathogens do manage to colonize, what effects can they have? This is what you guys are asking about right now, which is great. So again, from our chart, a pathogen is a generic term for any disease-causing organism. Let's go ahead and write that down. We say organism. We no longer recognize viruses as being living organisms themselves because they lack the machinery to replicate, right? And that's what they're doing is they're infecting ourselves, infecting host cells, hijacking the machinery to replicate, to create mRNA and DNA, and using our machinery to reproduce. So they're just little packets of genetic material. So we're going to say organism, but understand that it's kind of a fuzzy term. So pathogens could also be bacteria, viruses, as we mentioned, fungi, and protists. Fungi are especially interesting to me because they are genetically much more similar to humans than bacteria and viruses are. And so that makes them uniquely difficult to fight once they get a foothold in human systems. But I digress. So why do we need to prevent them from colonizing our bodies? And if pathogens do manage to colonize, what effects can they have? Realizing I have been asking a lot of rhetorical questions, but this one does not have to be a rhetorical question. So throw some words in the chat. What are some things that you see when someone is infected with a pathogen? What are some signs and symptoms that you would recognize? Yep, mess up some body systems functions. Cool. Say more. One of the ways that pathogens can mess up our body's functions is to simply overgrow, overpopulate. Is it just me or did the stream freeze?